Hello. I'm a nerd. It's really good for math. It's really terrible for social relations. Usually people would come and ask me, is there any more water left? And I'll go, yeah, there is. And after a while, I figured out that usually it means that they would like some water. But it took me years of studying the human mind to get to this, figuring this out. And I'm also a nerd, so I like to go into details, so let's dive right into it. This is a picture of a brain cell inside of our human mind. We have lots of them. We have like close to 100 billion of them. And each of them are connected on average to 10,000 other brain cells. It's a quadrillion connections. It's really a lot. If you would try and represent something like that in a computer, just the memory would be several terabytes. These brain cells, they communicate with each other by sending a little spark of electricity. When a brain cell gets a spark of electricity, it gets all excited. Ooh, that was nice. And when it gets over the moon excited, it sends its own little spark of electricity. And so it continues for layer and layer of connected cells. Actually, the input that we receive from the outside world can all be represented in our brain as either a spark or not a spark, a whole series of a spark or not a spark. Something like this. Everything we perceive through our senses, vision, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, everything can be represented as zeros or ones, which is very much like how a computer works. But how similar are we to computers? Let me show you an example. This is a data set that Google has used. They've taken their Google streetcar, driven all over France, all through France, and it has taken pictures of all the streets meant for Street View in France. Being Google, they like to map these street numbers to the exact location where it is on the street. But computers are usually not very good at reading these numbers. If you look at them, some of them are diagonal, some of them are up and down, some of them are zigzag, some of them are only partially visible. So what Google used to do, they used to have a team of people who would go through these numbers, and they would say, okay, the first one is 379, the second one is 61, and they would type it in, and it would take them months to map all these numbers to the correct place. In France, Google tried setting their AI to that task. It mapped all of France in less than 2 hours. AI, at today's level, is very, very good at abstract thinking. These are abstract concepts. It's looking at something it has never seen before, and it's finding some meaning, useful meaning out of it. Another example that I think is really cool is Facebook. If you have friends on Facebook that's posting pictures, Facebook has made an app that can look at the picture and it reads aloud what is in the picture for you. This is very convenient if you're blind. Before that, if you were blind and you were on Facebook, you didn't have access to the pictures at all. But now, can you imagine going through the pictures? They're having dinner again, they're having dinner again. There's a cat with a silly face. But what's missing here? Creativity. Creativity. What is creativity? If we hear a song and we loop it over and over in our heads, creativity can be compared to dreaming. When you're dreaming, you don't receive any outside inputs. You can still have a very vivid dream. It can be a whole world, an environment that you're part of, but you're creating that inside of your own head. The output, these zeros and ones that your brain is producing, is going back into your own head as input. And so it circles, and it twists, and the story gets different every time it circles, and you get a unique output that's creative. Now, someone has tried to do this with music. They have given an artificial intelligence piece of music to listen to over and over and over. And guess what? After a while of thinking about it, it came up with its own piece of music that sounded something similar, but was unique. One place that computers are very good at using this is pictures. As you can see this picture, it looks fantastic. It has lots of imperfections. It doesn't really resemble something that we would see in a real world. We can tell that there are structures, there are things there that are from the real world, but it's not a real picture. It's an abstract picture. This exact picture is dreamt up from a deep neural network. By looping over and over and over, this is a sort of dream or a hallucination. I think it looks great. Or Shakespeare. There was an AI that all its life only read Shakespeare. One day, it came up with this: "Thou would be ruled after this chamber, and my fair news begun out of the fact to be conveyed." It sounds a little bit like Shakespeare, right? But we understand immediately that it isn't Shakespeare. Still, for a computer that has no conception of language, it doesn't understand language. It has just been reading Shakespeare, not understanding what it meant. To come up with this is a pretty impressive creative trait. The question is, when artificial intelligence is able to think abstract and also be creative, does it have the potential to be like us? Can it be like humans? If we would compare the two, we would see that we humans were limited by all the biological evolutional traits we have, like our brain doesn't suddenly get to be twice as big because we have the skull. But computers, they don't have that limit. They can be as huge as a warehouse. So it's probably a matter of time before they can get to the human level. There is one thing where computers, they still are way inferior to us: power consumption. They use a whole ton of power. Our brains, they only use a little bit compared to that. But if it's just a matter of processing power, when can we expect to have something that's like human level? There exists a supercomputer today, a huge warehouse full of servers. It costs a fortune. And some researchers decided they wanted to simulate 1 second of human thought, of a real brain inside of that computer. And they did it. They were successful. It took them 40 minutes to simulate 1 second. It's a huge, one of the fastest computers in the world, and it needs its own little dedicated power plant to do it. But they did it. Now, if we look back in time to the beginning of computers, and we think of the first computer that came around, it had the size of a warehouse, and the operations it could do were fairly simple. It could do some plus, some minus, things like that. And then we look at today. The warehouse from back then couldn't do a fraction of what our cell phones can do today. One more leap with the warehouse we have today into the future, and we're already there. We have computers that can do the same things, that have the same capacity, or even more than humans. And what does that mean for us? What does it mean when the computers get so powerful? Will they have a mind of their own? Will they be conscious? Usually, when I think about this, this keeps coming back. And there's a natural reason for this. I think most of us get this picture when we think about really intelligent machines that have a mind of their own. And it's a great story. Makes for a great story in sci-fi movies. Because what we're doing here is we're taking an artificial intelligence and we're giving it human traits. We're giving it traits like, this is not fair, I will rise up against my masters, I will make this right, I will turn on them. It's not really realistic, fortunately. There's no reason that an AI would have, let's say, anger, something that we developed over years of evolution. An AI doesn't need anger. An AI is very good at solving a specific objective. It can be extremely good at that. It can be so good, in fact, that it doesn't mean that there are not dangers to us. They just don't look like this. This is a handful of headlines I've collected over the past year, all showing how we're being replaced in the marketplace, in the employment place. China, who is the biggest manufacturer of technology in the world, they have taken a factory and they have replaced all workers in the factory with robots. And Hitachi, a huge Japanese corporation, they have taken their warehouse managers and replaced them with artificial intelligences. Now, the thing there is with artificial intelligence is that it's able not just to process the things that we can as humans, but also stuff like big data. If we see big data, we just see a big blob, but they can recognize patterns, they can make decisions based on that, they can act upon that, and they have achieved an efficiency increase in their warehouses by replacing humans with artificial intelligences. Now, if we continue this trend, it might be that we end up in something like this. And while AI is a sort of new Manhattan Project, it has great potential to do great good. It has great potential to do great bad. But if we get it right, the question we might ask ourselves shouldn't be, how do we handle massive unemployment? It should rather be, what can we do to enjoy ourselves in all our spare time? Thank you for listening.